What is up, everyone? Welcome to episode 3 of Chalk Talk Nation. Joining me, as always, Noah Gayhart, Rob Rundle, and today we are going to be breaking down the National League Central Division. Before we went over the NL East and the AL East, and we're working our way to the West Coast. But before we get started, I want to encourage you guys to visit our website at www.chalktalknation.com. You can subscribe for our newsletter. You can also find our podcast there. Our podcasts across all platforms: Apple Music, Spotify, iHeartRadio, you name it, we got it. And follow us on Twitter at Chalk Talk Nation, and you'll see it scroll along the top of your screen. Noah, we have a lot to talk about, and spring training is finally upon us.
I know, it's about time, This off season's kind of dragged on us for a long time. It's good to, finally see some players out on the field for once.
Yeah, and before we dive into spring training, we're actually going to talk briefly about the Boston Red Sox. Now, it was mentioned by the commissioner and Major League Baseball that we would get some information by the end of the week on their update for their cheating allegations, but we haven't. So, no, I just kind of wanted to ask you, what do you think of this, and what should we expect as fans going forward towards this week?
Yeah, I mean, I can't say I'm surprised considering the way that the MLB's kind of handled the rest of this whole cheating scandal. So I'm not really necessarily surprised that they're not meeting their deadlines as far as when we're supposed to hear about stuff. I would say that as far as what the punishment's probably going to look like, I would say Alex Cora is going to get hit a lot harder than the Red Sox themselves, just because he was involved in both sides of the scandal.
Yeah.
The Red Sox, I doubt they'll even get the max fine like what the Astros got, because I mean what they were doing wasn't nearly as bad as what the Astros were doing. It wasn't as much as like a deep dive kind of thing as what everything that the Astros did. I mean, we're still learning new stuff about what the Astros were doing, so I mean, I don't think it's going to be as bad, but. I don't know. I would imagine sometime within the next 5 to 7 days at the latest we'll find out most of everything, but who knows?
No, I completely agree with you. Alex Cora being he was the bench coach in 2017 with the Houston Astros, for those who don't know, and he's guilty as charged, right? He is, and then he went on to Boston, and like you said, the players and stuff like that, I don't think it's going to be anywhere near, or just the organization. I think it's just going to be Alex Cora, like you said. And yeah, it's going to be really interesting because I thought about this. How hard is it going to be for Cora and Hinch to find a job after their suspension's up? Do they start back in the minors, or do they go back just being a bench coach? Because I feel like no matter what, there's respect lost.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely respect lost, like you said. And then, like they're going to have suspensions. Like Hinch has a year's suspension. So anyone that wants to hire him, pretty much just to hire him and just not have a coach for that position for a year because he's not allowed to serve until his suspension's up. So I mean, I think that alone is kind of the biggest hurdle, further than like the cheating scandal itself. Like I mean, I could see a world where a guy like Carlos Beltran gets a job somewhere down the line as well. But like any of the three of Hinch, Cora, and Beltran, that's just who wants to take on a year suspension to get a coach? Like, are they really that good of coaches that it's worth it?
Right. I mean, and Hinch, yes, he won a World Series, but it's tainted, right? I mean,
right.
And now you just kind of go into question, well, how good are you as an actual manager? Just from a personal ethic standard, he's not good at all because he never shut it down. And personally, I think if he's going to even try to get into Major League Baseball again, I think you have to start back in the minors and just work your way back up. I think that's how you have to start to earn that respect back,
right?
To prove that you can win and everything like that. So, two guys, 2 World Series champions. That just makes you love the Washington Nationals even more. Honestly, it just does. It just does. But moving forward from that, we'll kind of stay on the east side of things when we talk about the Washington Nationals, but we're going to move up north, talking about the New York Yankees. Now, we learned that Luis Severino has been shut down indefinitely after arm stiffness, and he had arm stiffness going in towards the end of last season. This is not good news for the Yankees.
Oh, yeah, not at all. I think the biggest thing that's surprising about it is this has been going on since the end of last season, like you said, and you'd think with an entire off season that like something like that, if it's just arm stiffness, would have healed by now.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't. This is gonna suck for their rotation at the beginning of the year. I think if anyone can handle a loss like this, though, it's probably the Yankees.
Yep.
Not necessarily because they have the biggest pitching depth in the world. I would guess maybe Jonathan Loisiga or like Delvi Garcia, one of their top prospects, maybe comes up and fills that 5 spot in the rotation now. But with how powerful their lineup is in an already hitter-friendly ballpark like Yankee Stadium, I think that they can just outslug their way through the American League until a guy like Severino gets back.
And what also helps too that they added, which could kind of fill that void, was Garrett Cole. Garrett
Yeah.
Cole is going to be a guy who gives you almost 16, 17 more wins than what you might have had with another pitcher. So it's definitely tough though because he's been battling injuries for a couple years now. It seems like, and I'd really just like to see him in full stride. And it sucks that we probably won't. But that's the update on Luis Severino with the Yankees. Now, with that in mind, actually, Jonathan Loazia, or is that how you say his name?
Loisiga, I think.
Loisiga.
Maybe.
I always called him Jonathan Lasagna. It just looks
Yeah.
like lasagna, but he actually pitched today for the Yankees and split squad and did fairly well. But other spring training games that have started, it was really interesting to see. The Houston Astros took on the Washington Nationals, and they got booed like hard. And I just want your thoughts on this. Like, it's just hilarious how this is how it starts out. And the Astros, they put out the most booty lineup possible to avoid, because you just never know, even in spring training. That just shows how serious the situation is.
Yeah, I mean, I feel really bad for the Astros players that were out there. None of the guys on the field had, most of the guys didn't have like almost any MLB service time at all.
Yeah.
And those that that did have service time didn't get on the team until like the end of 2018. So I mean, it kind of
Yep.
sucks for them that you're taking the field for maybe the first time in big league spring training camp and you're just getting booed immediately. So that kind of sucked for those guys. But I guess that comes with the turf of being on the Astros now. Uh, I was more interested with the tweet that blew up. It's something we talked about before we went on air about the signs getting stolen. How do
Yeah,
you
let
feel
me
about
pull let me
that?
pull, let me pull that up real quick because that is really really funny. I'm gonna pull that up for everyone right now. Um, take you back over here. This is hilarious. So there's stadium personnel here that you can see that literally walked around the stadium taking away. This says the Houston Asterix for those watching, and it is just absolutely hilarious, right? It just fans should be able to do whatever they want, but that just shows seriously how intense the situation is across Major League Baseball because they're trying to improve the image. They don't want this happening, but in a way, you would think that this would help with ratings, right? I mean, Major League Baseball has been an American pure sport since the longest time, and the last scandal that really came out, if you can even consider it, really was just the steroid era, right? Just
Mm.
guys juicing, Jose Canseco, Mark McGuire, and it's going to add a lot of viewers to our game. But I mean, it's day two, and still none of the Astros' actual roster has played yet. You look at all other teams across Major League Baseball, 29 other teams, they've been playing their studs, even a couple innings and whatnot. And you
Mhm.
have to. I kind of want to ask you too. How do you think this will prepare the Astros for the season? Because some other teams will be in full stride and they'll have their guys to get these reps.
You know, I would imagine that eventually this is going to stop and their guys are going to play more. I mean, it's been 2 days, so who really knows? Like, I doubt these 2 days are going to make or break whether or not a guy like Alex Bregman is ready for opening day.
Yeah.
I mean, they only get roughly 50 to 60 at bats anyways, as it is. Uh, I doubt that it's going to make a big impact. The only guys where I would see it could make an impact is if any of their starters, like, they just don't throw them in games. Because with starters, you kind of got to work your way up. Like, you see a lot of, if you've watching the game so far for spring training, guys are only going like an inning or 2 innings max because they got to
Yeah.
stretch their arms out to be able to throw 6, 7, 8 innings. And so the less starts are more and that you make, the harder it's going to be for you to go out on opening day or whenever your spot comes up in the rotation and pitch 7 innings. So if
Hmm.
anyone's going to be affected by it, I would say it would be the pitching staff. But even then, I don't think these 2 days are going to make that big of a difference.
Yeah, and if I was Dusty Baker, I think if there's going to be a team that doesn't throw at you, I think it would be any National League team that wasn't the Dodgers, especially the Nationals. They won the World Series. Why would they?
Hmm.
Why would they try and beam you? And Max Scherzer, he took the ball for the Nationals to open up spring training. And even though the situation that's happened, I don't think Scherzer's that type of player to do that, you know. But very interesting in
Yeah,
West Palm Beach,
everyone's
Florida.
getting punished except for the Astros players. You know, it's,
Yep, you're absolutely right. But we'll kind of go back to the injuries for a brief second, and we'll talk about two Yankees that we have here in a rundown. James Paxton, this is good. He had a really low, even though his ERA was elevated last year, his FIP was down below. So he had a good FIP last year, and he'll start throwing in 10 days because we know he had back issues. That could be huge too, to fill in that void for Severino. Also, Aaron Judge expected to resume hitting this week. Off after his shoulder issue. So what do you make of this? How do we see Aaron Judge stepping into spring training possibly?
I mean, I'm sure Aaron Judge is gonna be fine. He's an absolute stud at the plate. Plays solid defense. Obviously, shoulder issues are kind of something you have to worry about because like in baseball, you're gonna use that in pretty much everything you're gonna do.
Yeah.
I would say as long as there's no setbacks for him in spring training, I think he should be fine. I don't know. I think the Paxton's definitely the one more to watch, just because I mean they just lost Severino, and definitely
Right.
Paxton. You're looking at probably I think what they said in the beginning was like an end of May earliest return.
That's not
So
bad.
that's that. Well, it's not bad, but it also kind of is when you're losing two of your top three guys in your rotation for 2 months of the year. So I
Could
don't
be
know. It's gonna be
worse.
interesting to see what they do. Like if they maybe just go shorter with their starters and just really try to work their bullpen in early into games to kind of combat that. So it'll definitely be a storyline to keep an eye on as far as the beginning of the season goes.
Yeah, just kind of, and I know we're both in agreement, just their offensive power and contact, they're going to have to carry the Yankees for the first month and a half or so.
Mm-hmm.
But they should be just fine. They'll probably still win 100 ball games like we talked about.
Oh yeah, yep.
So there's no issues there. So for those baseball fans out there, you have your diehard fans, but you also have your average baseball fans. Maybe they just like to put on a game while they're cleaning or every now and then. What should fans look for when watching spring training games?
Yeah, so I think at this point in the year, you're probably just looking for guys that you either haven't heard the name of in a long time, like a guy that I was interested in hearing what he'd do, like for the Reds is like Boog Powell.
Right.
You know,
Yeah. Just
Boog
the
Powell's
name.
not going to make the roster,
No.
but he's a guy that he's been on the Padres, he's been on the Athletics before. Maybe you turn on a game and you go, "Oh, hey, that's what that guy's been up to." Or maybe you look at like a team like the Braves who signed Felix Hernandez, and you might go, "Hey, let's see what he's up to now that he's in on a different team." And then I think the other thing that you might look for this early is just kind of getting to know some of like the newer faces and like the future faces of baseball. You look at like the White Sox played the Reds today, and guys like Luis Robert, Eloy Jimenez, Nick Madrigal, and Dylan Cease all got playing time today. Those are guys that could all be big name all stars. At some point in the
Yeah.
near future. So I think at this point, when you're seeing a lot of prospects in games and guys that probably aren't going to make the opening day roster, you're just kind of looking for fun names to watch. But
Yeah.
it starts to get serious towards the end of spring training, and maybe then you look for positional battles. But this early, it's just kind of more of a fun watch.
Yeah, towards the end of spring training, that's when you really want to try and get into that groove. Every fifth day you'll have a pitcher go out and you'll try to figure out your rotation, matchups, lefties on righties on lefties. But for me, it's all about the prospects because that is the future of baseball. Because we already know what's kind of solidified for these teams, these lineups. And actually, Adam Hazley that we talked about in the NL East preview, he was penciled in probably to be the opening day center fielder, which is exciting for him. He's only 23 years old. But, guys like that, and especially after the Mookie Betts trade, seeing Connor Wong, Jeter Downs, those guys, Gratterall, all those kind of guys pitching and playing, that's what I love the most. And you see how they mesh with other players. Maybe these are guys that they're going to start out in Double-A with, and maybe they work their way up, So that's the big thing of spring training that I think everyone should look out for. I think we're both right. And it'll be an exciting month, before opening day. It's just 32 days away. So that's exciting. But one thing that we need to mention too. Now this is pretty big because we talked about this last week. Finally, Brock Holt. And before we say Brock Holt, so remember last week how I said Alex Verdugo changed his number? Evidently he was going to be 12, but he changed it to 99.
Mm-hmm.
So he changed it to 99 to honor Manny Ramirez, which I thought was
right.
cool.
Yeah.
I thought he was just doing that just because it's Alex Verdugo and like, hey, Brock Holt, maybe he's coming back. No, that's not the case. But Brock Holt signed with Milwaukee, the Milwaukee Brewers, for $3.25 million on a year deal with a 2021 club option for $5 million, which I don't see how the Brewers wouldn't want that. This is a guy who can play every single position, third base, shortstop, second base, outfield. You put him there, he's going to get the job done. I really, really like this deal, especially for the Brewers who haven't really made many offseason moves.
Yeah, you know, the problem with the Brewers, if you look at their infield, is you have a lot of guys that you just have no clue what you're gonna get. You look at a
Right,
guy
right.
like Orlando Arcia, who probably before Brock Holt was gonna be starting shortstop, now it's kind of up in the air. He's a guy that it feels like for every year for like a month, he plays super well, and
Yep.
everybody goes, is this year he's finally gonna break out? And then he ends up hitting like 230 for the year, or he just like doesn't produce.
Same with Eric
Um,
Sogard.
yeah, Eric Sogart's another guy that I think last year had like one monster month, and then the rest of the year didn't really do a whole lot. Uh, the guy that they just acquired this offseason, Luis Arias, he's a guy that's literally absolutely dominating the minor leagues, and then he comes up to the major leagues, and he OPS is 600. So it's kind of like you don't really know what you're going to get out of these guys at the major league level, and so
Yeah.
signing a guy like Brock Holt gives you position versatility and a guy that you kind of know already what you're going to be getting.
Veteran guy. And it's crazy too because this is a guy that a lot of people still don't know about and the numbers he can produce, especially for being one of those platoon guys for the Red Sox. And he really stepped up when Petey went down, and that's what the Red Sox really needed, right? And maybe Brock Holt can give the Brewers a little bit of life. You never know because they're pitching. We'll get into that. Later on here in the podcast. But also, Jonathan Lucroy signs a minor league contract with the Boston Red Sox. Do you think this is a good or bad signing?
Neutral. He's going to be the
Yeah.
backup catcher. I mean, all-star once in his career, veteran guy. But I mean, this isn't going to move the needle for the Red Sox one way or the other. That's just kind of, to me, it just seems like a depth move.
This is fifth team in 6 seasons now. And you look back at Jonathan Lucroy just earlier in the past decade, 2012, 2013, this was a guy who was top notch, and just kind of started to fall off. But that's another veteran guy, though, that can really help Vasquez back there and whatnot and try and get the ball rolling, trying to figure some pieces out. So I'm neutral about it, too. It's not a great signing, but it's not a bad signing. I mean, it's a minor league contract for Lucroy, and catching, it is hard to come by. There hasn't been a good second base market. There hasn't been a good catching market out there for the past 3 seasons. So
yeah. I mean, you can never have too much depth at catching. I point to the Reds last year that were in one point on like catchers 6 and 7 in the depth chart, and like we were just signing guys to stick them on the field. So you could get into a position, a couple injuries, and suddenly you're really hurting at catcher. So it doesn't hurt.
Yeah. Do you have anything else you want to talk about for spring training before we move right in?
Well, I mean, it's not spring training. It is a signing that happened today.
Oh yeah, Brian
Padres
Dozier. That's right.
Padres added Brian Dozier on a minor league deal. One note on him: 2014 and 2019, he's one of only 2 second basemen to hit at least 20 home runs every season. The other being Jonathan Scope. So I mean, if you can get that on a minor league deal, good on you. It's a low risk, high reward type of thing. All-star, probably got some MVP votes about 2 years ago. And then the year before, or 3 years ago,
2016.
2 years ago,
2016,
he really just fell off. And then last year, he kind of got close to league average. I think he's like OPS around 770, like a 95 OPS plus. So, he's around average. So I mean, if you can get that on a minor league deal, like that definitely helps your organizational depth.
Yeah, definitely not a guy to hit for average or on base percentage, but that slugging is what really helps him out. And there's a hitter friendly ballpark there in the NL West that.
Well, there's a lot that aren't too, though.
I know.
Think about Padres Stadium.
That's true, but that'd be cool to talk about the Padres too in the NL West and see how they'll shape out with Fernando Tatis and all those guys. Any other thoughts?
I think that's all I had. So.
All right. Wow, we're just rolling today, folks. First team we're going to talk about is the Chicago Cubs. Now, the Chicago Cubs added Jeremy Jeffress on a 1-year, $850,000 deal. 2019, not so good. 52 innings pitched, 5.02 ERA. But he had an average whip, 1.37. And Jason Kipnis, who we saw actually flash some leather last night in spring training. And it actually looked pretty good, I'm not going to lie.
Yeah. I mean, I think what's telling and what we're going to see with most of the teams in the division is that's the end of their additions list. You got a guy
Yeah.
on a minor league deal in Jason Kipnis and a guy on a not even $1 million deal in Jeremy Jeffries.
And they lost a lot
Yeah,
of
we'll get to the
pieces.
losses in a second, but
Yeah.
they just I like the Jeffries signing. Their bullpen needs the help. Obviously last year was a down year. 2018 though, he's an all-star, 76 and two-thirds innings pitched, 1.29 ERA, a whip under 1, a 317 ERA plus. So that's like 217% above league average. So I think that you would take that if you can find some sort of happy medium. Uh, we've talked about Kipnis. I think we talked about him last week and the first episode of the podcast as well. There's not much more else to be said. Kind of a below average guy at this point in his career, just kind of a depth move.
Yeah.
Do you want to get into some of the losses that they took this year though?
Yeah. Quite a bit actually. Just kind of a dagger to the heart if you really want to talk about it. Lost veteran pitcher in Cole Hamels. It's a lefty. Lefties are very valuable in this game, and he went to the Braves, and that's a National League contender team that will probably make a run in the playoffs. That's a huge loss. The biggest one by far that they acquired via trade from the Tigers in the middle of the season, who went on an absolute tear. I mean, it was ridiculous how just a phenomenal player. Nick Castellanos signed with the Reds, and then they lost Ben Zobrist, who retired, and Zobrist had some personal issues, didn't he? I think
I'm
because he
not
could still
sure,
play, but I
oh
think
yeah,
he
he
had.
could still play. It could have just been one of those things where he just was ready to retire, or maybe just the market wasn't there for him as a free agent, like
Yeah.
the way he thought it would be. But yeah, I don't know. Then they lost Steve Cechek and Pedro Strop, a couple guys out of the bullpen, and they're already hurting in the bullpen, so this definitely doesn't help their case.
And they don't have David Phelps. David Phelps actually did very well when he was acquired from the Blue Jays around the trade deadline as well. So, and actually, he's with the Brewers now. So that's another guy that they lost.
Yeah, and I think what hurts the most is a lot of these guys they lost, like Castellanos, you mentioned Phillips and Pedro Strop, like they went to contenders like in their own division. So not
Yeah.
not only are they going to lose those guys, but now they got to turn on the TV and play them 18 and watch them play 18 times a year. And so
Yeah.
that just kind of it's a little extra sting in the heart when you get beat by the guys you used to have, as a fan. So
Yep.
I don't know. Do I
So,
get in the lineup?
well, it sucks to suck because they're on your favorite team, my favorite National League team, the Reds.
Yeah.
So, I mean, hey, just off the shoulders a little bit. Yeah, we'll go ahead and get right into the Cubs lineup. So, our projecting lineup that we have here pulled up for you, we have Wilson Contreras behind the dish, Anthony Rizzo at first base, at second base, Nico Horner,
Yep.
and you might be able to slash in Jason Kipnis if he makes the big league club. Chris Bryant, who actually is starting to lead off for the Cubs. Now, that's one thing I want to talk about, too. David Ross has the flu, and he missed the first spring training game, which really sucks. But I actually like Chris Bryant as a leadoff guy. He can hit for power, can get on base, and that really sets things up for, the likes of Anthony Rizzo, Javier Baez, and I personally like it. But you got Javi Baez at short, Kyle Schwarber in the outfield, joined with Jason Hayward and Ian Happ. Thoughts?
I like the upside with this lineup. You don't really know necessarily what you're going to get out of Nico Horner at second base, but he's a guy with top prospect pedigree. But if you look at their lineup, Contreras, Rizzo, Chris Bryant, Baez are all above average hitters, even at their positions. Schwarber and Happ are kind of hit or miss guys. Either they're going to absolutely crush the ball this year or they're going to hit like 240. You don't really know what you're going to get out of Jason Hayward either, but they've got a pretty good couple of pieces off the bench too. Albert Amora Jr. is a guy that can play all three outfield spots. David Bodie can play literally everywhere, I think, except center field and catcher. And then Steven Souza Jr. is some pop off the bench. And then Victor Caratini, who I almost completely forgot about, it's another guy that could play catcher, first base, corner outfield spots, and he got some pop too. I don't know. What do you think about their lineup?
I like their offensive depth that they have, especially defensively too with Almora, because he was not a good hitter last year at all. But that's a guy you can, slate in the late stages of the ball game, especially at Wrigley Field, where it's more than a pitcher-friendly park, if you ask me. I think it's almost 350 to left field and right field, and we're not talking Coors Field. Like, that's insane. But the upside, we have it in our notes too. I mean, just going back to that Chris Bryant in the leadoff spot, followed by Rizzo, I really like that. It's dynamic. It's a dynamic lineup that we didn't see with Joe Madden, who was the manager per se. And more interesting than not, I think it's going to be interesting to see how David Ross approaches this. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I mean, David Ross is a younger manager, and so he's probably going to be a bit more innovative than what we're seeing from Joe Madden. Joe Madden's a guy that still likes to bunt, and I think that's enough said right there as far as how he innovates. Uh, I really like the Chris Bryant followed by Anthony Rizzo thing for the lineup. He's a guy that, like you said, he gets on base, he hits for some power, and I think that that's kind of where we're going in this league. Is you want a guy that's going to get on base and hit consistently instead of just let's stick our fastest guy at the top of the lineup. And
Yeah.
anytime you could follow that up with Rizzo and then by Javi Baez or whoever you want to stick in the three spot, honestly, like that's gonna be a tough first inning to get through. And those are the guys that are gonna get the most at bats too, being at the top of the lineup. So I think
Yeah.
it's gonna be good.
Yeah, and you look at the Indians too in the AL Central with Carlos Santana. They used to bet him leadoff all the time.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily baseball is forever evolving. Especially guys like Wellens Astudillo with the Twins. That's a big guy who can run.
Hmm.
You give him a chance to play. He's not going to catch, obviously, with Mitch Garver coming up, but it's different, right? If you can get on base, it's not necessarily just bunting him over and everything like that. These are guys who can hit gap to gap. Like you could score a run within the first 2-3 at bats. I mean, that's huge, especially
Right.
with the pitching they have. They're going to need all those early runs. If you can get to
Hmm.
that 3 to 4 run mark by the fifth inning or sixth, you're going to be in good shape. So,
Yeah, I think it's just gonna be a matter of holding the leads. Yu Darvish is a guy that came over from the Rangers and he struggled. He kind of found a stride towards the end of last season. They're gonna have to hope that he can like carry that into this year. Jose Quintana's a guy that the Cubs gave up a ton for. They gave up Eloy Jimenez, Dylan Cease, who are both gonna be big pieces of the White Sox this year. And as far as talent wise, they really haven't gotten that return out of Jose Quintana that they thought they were gonna get. Um, Kyle Hendricks is a guy that I personally really like. He's
I like him
only
too.
throws like 88 to 90 miles an hour,
He's got a
kind of more of a
nasty
pitch,
sinker.
yeah, pitch to contact kind of guy, but you can do that in Chicago. So I would expect
Yeah.
he'll probably be the most consistent guy in them for the rotation. But then you look at the 4 and 5. John Lester's starting to get up there in age, and Tyler Chatwood's not really a guy I want to rely on that heavily either. So, and then you can also talk about the bullpen. Craig Kimbrell, they signed him midway through last season, and he was just abysmal. And then, the rest of their bullpen kind of followed the same suit. So I don't know if you want to talk on that at all, but
Yeah, I think Craig Kimbrell, you couldn't have a worse year than last year, honestly. But I think now you get in a routine. Like with pitching, it's all about routine, right? Trevor Bauer talks about this, and that's why he doesn't like the new playoff format. And it makes sense because you're doing these things consistently 162 games out of the year. When you come into a new culture, because Chicago is not like Atlanta, Chicago is not like Boston, that there's chemistry there. And having to come in as an outsider, wanting all this money, and just trying to dive right in. I think he signed in June, right? Was it June or like May?
yeah, June or July. It was,
So
it was
summer.
definitely a
It
few
was in the
months in.
summer. It was in the
Yeah.
summer. It's just tough. And actually, I think he blew a save his first game with the Cubs, if I
Mhm.
remember correctly. And now you have an off season to gather your thoughts, get to know the guys a little bit better, understand your role, your value to the organization. I think Craig Kimbrell will definitely have a very good year. I don't think it's going to be elite per se,
Mhm.
but I think it's going to be a very good year. I think he'll be hovering around that 3 ERA mark and whatnot. I could see him more as a startup guy or a setup man and just work his way to be that closer. They probably will put him as a closer, but I put him as a setup man just to see how he is because we saw the similar issues with Shane Green when, granted, he was already signed, but he got traded to Atlanta in the summer
Mhm.
as a closer, new culture, got absolutely
Right.
he got mollywopped. And those are just my thoughts about it. Their bullpen is weak. Their bullpen's really weak though, man. I worry about it. They're gonna have to rely heavily on the offensive load.
Mhm.
But yeah, any final thoughts?
Uh, I guess my final thought would be, I'm not that worried about it. That's a little bit biased as a Reds fan. So, you know what? I kind of hope that their bullpen doesn't
Well,
doesn't carry the weight this year.
I
But yeah,
understand.
no, I think Kimbrel goes into the closer spot because who else are they going to put there? I mean, you don't know what you're going to get out of Jeremy Jeffress. Roman
2018
Wick
or
and Kyle,
2019 is a big difference,
right?
right?
Roman Wick and Kyle Ryan were a couple of guys that they came out of the bullpen. They pitched pretty well. ERAs around 3.5, but those were only over like half seasons, and these are not guys that have spent a lot of
Yeah.
time in the big leagues either. So, it's kind of a mixture of big league guys with some pedigree that have really underperformed recently, and guys that performed well when they came up, but who knows if they can sustain that over a whole season.
We'll just have to see. Like you said too, if the bias is coming out, because my favorite National League team is the Reds. I hope not, but as an organization, you want your bullpen to be solidified. You want to have that safety net that if you have a 1-run lead, you're not going to blow it. It'll be interesting for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But moving on, we will talk about your favorite team, the Cincinnati Reds. Now, the Cincinnati Reds, by far, unbiased baseball opinion, had the best offseason in Major League Baseball. Would you agree with that?
I don't know if they're necessarily the best team.
Ouch, that was
uh,
tough, Noah. Come on now. I'm trying to do something. I'm just messing with you. Continue.
but you know, I mean, definitely in the NL Central for sure. But I mean, I think you could throw a couple other teams up there. Like it's hard to say that like that the Angels or the Yankees or even the White Sox didn't have better off seasons just because they went out and got a big guy on top of some other moves. But yeah, they're definitely up there. That's for sure. I think.
I'd say them and the Braves.
Yeah, I mean the Braves are another team that definitely were in there too. But you look at the guys that they added. They didn't get the top echelon guys. The way that I've kind of been explaining it is that this offseason kind of aged like fine wine. Out of the gate, we whiffed on Grandal and Gregorius. And so then you start thinking, well, crap, we missed on the guys that we were projected to go get. So who's left out there? And
Yeah.
then you go out and then suddenly you're able to land Nick Castellanos for 4 years.
I was really surprised by that too, by the way. Just the fact that we even had a chance at him in the late stages of the offseason.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Well, I'll talk about it. He's got a really weird contract, and I think that's part of why we were able to do it. So the total on the contract's 4 years, 64 million, but it also has opt-outs after the first and second years. So
Mm.
so for a guy, so if you look at the deal that Castellanos got compared to a guy like Marcelo Zuna said, "I'm going to bet on myself for this year only," where
Mm-hmm.
Castellanos said, "I'm going to bet on myself for this year because I can opt out at the end of this year. This year doesn't go well, I could stay opted in and bet on myself again next year. And if both those seasons don't go well, then I've got 2 more years of financial security." So it's a really weird contract for the Reds from the Reds perspective. But let's say that they just get one really good year out of Nick Castellanos and he leaves, then great, you got him for that 1 year, and it was really great.
And you don't have to pay
So
him. You don't have to pay him the
right, and then
64
you don't have to
mil.
pay right.
So it's kind of a win-win situation in a way, kind of.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It's really weird. There's not a lot of contracts out there like it. Uh, my favorite move of the offseason, and I think we overpaid a little bit, but I think it's probably, given the circumstance, going to be worth it, is that we got Mike Moustakas, which is kind of weird because he's not usually the typical guy that I like. I'm a big fan of OBP guys, so guys like Joey Votto, Jesse Winker, the kind of guys that I kind of am more attracted to.
Yeah.
And Mike Moustakas is not going to be a get on base guy, 321, 329 OBP last year, but he's a guy that hits 30 plus home runs a season. High fly ball rate, especially in Great American Ballpark, is huge.
Yeah.
And last season he put up 3.2 WAR. That's not all-star level, but you got to think about that cumulatively for the Reds last year, our WAR was like negative 1.2. So yeah, it's only 3.2 WAR, but really the upgrade is 4.4 WAR because you got to account for the fact that we're not going to be negative either. So I think that that's going to be huge.
That is huge, for sure.
We also added Shogo Akiyama, Wade Miley, Pedro Strop, who we just talked about from the Cubs. We're really the only team that went out and added anybody that's going to really contribute and be like stand out on a major league roster inside this division.
Yeah, and you look at those first two guys, Nick Castellanos and Mike Moustakas, guys who can easily hit 30 plus home runs and this wasn't even at Great American Ballpark. Okay, yes, Mike Moustakas and Castellanos, but they're not playing 81 home games. Is what I'm saying at Great American Ballpark last year,
Hmm.
But now
Yeah.
they are, and it's going to be very dangerous. But now it's important too not to get ahead of ourselves because I know we talked about that last year when we signed Puig. That he's going to hit 35,
Hmm.
40
Yeah.
bombs, and then he kind of fell off a little bit. But with these
Hmm.
guys, I mean, Musakis is going to be nice too because he's probably. I don't know what the updates about Suarez are right now, but Mustakis will probably play third base to start out the season. Am I right?
So the latest with Suarez is that he's aiming to be back around opening day. I know that I think that or later, sometime later this week, in the next couple of days, he's going to start throwing, and then a few days after that, he's going to start taking swings. So I would say with that kind of timetable, he's probably going to look to be back around opening day. So
Okay.
I would say if he misses opening day, I'd say he's not going to be more than a week behind.
Okay. Yeah, that's not bad either. And I think what really stands out for the Reds too, though, this off season, you look at other teams and they've had some key losses, right? The
Hmm.
Reds, they're probably thankful for the losses they had. If you really think about it, I mean, you lose Jose Peraza, who technically almost had an All Star year in 2018, and but you lose Alex Wood, who was injured for most of the season. Jose Iglesias, not an OBP guy, doesn't hit for, not good slugging. And then Kevin Gosman. Okay, see you later. You can go to the Giants. But this team is going to be very good, and that starting rotation is pretty solidified too with Wade Miley, who in the past couple of years really revamped his career. With the Astros and the Brewers, and then we mentioned last week too Nate Jones. A Northern
Hmm.
Kentucky guy, minor league contract. You can bring him up. He's got three options, right? If you bring him up, it's not that big of a deal. The dude throws 98 miles per hour on a two seamer with a weird arm slot. And with that stride, too, with how tall he is, it could come in almost at 100, 101, it looks like. I mean,
Hmm.
I just really like what the Reds have done this offseason, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. It'll be interesting to see how the outfield plays out, and we'll kind of get into that once we get into the lineups. But you
Yep.
mentioned Wade Miley, and what's huge is he turned around his career with the Brewers, working with Derek Johnson, their pitching coach. Guess who the Reds' pitching coach is now? Derek Johnson. So you know, he, you know, uh, he kind of worked on a cutter when he was in Milwaukee, and that's kind of where he saw the success. And then he went to the Astros, and through August, he's a guy that was top three in the league in ERA. And then,
Yep.
it came out that he was tipping his pitches in September, and the dude absolutely just started getting shelled left and right. But if they could figure out how to fix where he was tipping his pitches, then suddenly he's a guy that was elite at the top of the leaderboards in ERA last year, and that's your five guy in the rotation. I think you'll take that any day of the week.
Yes, and it's nice, too, that he's left handed. The Reds could
Hmm.
use
Yeah,
a lefty in the rotation. So,
yeah. I
speaking of,
don't know if we've had one in a while, honestly.
I mean, Alex Wood, honestly, the last one I could really think about that was, if you wouldn't even say solidified, Travis Wood. I can't really
Yeah,
think of.
and that's what 2012, 2013. So
Dude,
and it,
I never even realized that. Oh my gosh, that's insane. Hold on, I got to think about this for a second.
I don't think there is one. I mean, you've had guys that have made starts, like Amir Garrett made starts, Cody Reed made starts, Brandon
Yeah,
Finnegan made starts. But as far as a
Brandon
solidified
Finnegan,
for an entire
that's one.
season, I don't think we've had one since probably Travis Wood.
So that'll be nice for the Reds too, because technically, even if he is your number five, you might move him as a 3 or 4 just to keep the balance.
Yeah.
But dude, this rotation right now, as it sits, you got Luis Castillo, Sonny Gray, Trevor Bauer, Anthony Desclafani, and Wade Miley. Those are 5 solid pitchers right there.
Oh yeah, that's definitely. I would say it's probably a top five rotation in baseball.
Oh, no doubt.
You got to think Castillo is a guy that could potentially win a Cy Young. If Sonny Gray pitches the way he did last year, he's gonna be a guy that's gonna be in the Cy Young conversation. And then Trevor Bauer's a guy that won it in 2018 in the American League. So you
He
get three
finished
guys
second. He finished
or
second behind
finished
Kluber.
finished second. Yeah, excuse me. But those are three guys that they're in that conversation.
Yeah.
And then you've got Discofani, who's when he's been healthy, he's been an above average pitcher in the big leagues. And then we've
Oh,
already talked about
gotcha.
Wade Miley. There's no hole. And so I think that that's going to be huge for the Reds moving forward. And I mean, it kind of the only thing that scares me is that, we have Tyler Mahle in depth, who I'm really high on myself. I think that the peripherals have been a lot better than what he's shown in the major leagues. But after you get past Tyler Mahle, if there's any more injuries past that, it really kind of falls off in terms of the depth that the Reds have.
Yeah, and something too that I just thought about was Sonny Gray. You look back at his days in Oakland, all-star pitcher,
Mhm.
small market team. He goes to the Bronx, right? And he gets absolutely shelled. He did not do well at all with the Yankees.
Yeah,
And I really do think it was just the big city atmosphere because, I was terrified when he came back to Cincinnati because I didn't know what kind of pitcher he'd be because Great
right.
American is still a very hitter-friendly ballpark. But I think it's proven that he's just a small market type of pitcher, and he
Yeah,
loves Cincinnati. He does.
yeah. Part of it too, which is really weird that it ended up coming out, because people asked him when he got to the Reds from New York, was like, "Hey, what happened? Like you were the stud in Oakland," and apparently the Yankees were trying to tell him to not throw his curveball as much. And if
Really?
you've ever watched, yeah, and if you've ever watched Sonny Gray pitch, that's like his bread and butter is throwing
Yeah.
curveball, slider, bunch of movement, breaks really hard,
Because he
and they
doesn't
were
have
trying to.
velocity at all. Like he's not
Right,
a
he's
guy
like,
that's
I
going to
mean, he sits
overpower you.
94, 95,
Yeah.
which 10, 15 years ago, yeah, that's velocity, but now dudes are hitting 100 in the seventh inning. So it's like, it's not really a whole lot anymore.
Yeah.
But yeah, so, and for whatever reason, I guess that they just were trying to get him to not throw it. And I guess I could see where if you're like, hey, don't throw your best pitch anymore, where suddenly you become a lot worse of a pitcher. So,
Absolutely. I could see that for sure then. That makes perfect sense to me. Well, I think that's a good time to let's just transition into the Reds' potential lineup. You look at their projecting lineup. Catcher, you got Tucker Barnhart, and you can also put in Kirk Casale there. First base, your man Noah, Joey Votto,
mhm.
as I like to call him, Joseph Daniel Votto. Second base, you got Mike Moustakas. Third base, Eugenio Suarez, who had an outstanding year, probably the best year of his career. We get him for Alfredo Simon,
Yes,
and
the
then
bloated corpse of Alfredo Simon.
we ended up getting Alfredo Simon back the following year or something like
Yeah,
that
that
too.
was kind of like a failed experiment. So let's not mention that part. But
Yeah,
yeah, we
yeah,
got him
right.
for Alfredo Simon.
And then we got Freddie Galvis at short in the outfield. Now this is where we're going to talk about because you got five guys. Five guys. You want to talk about depth? They have it. Nick Castellanos, Jesse Winker, Shogo Akiyama in the outfield, and then you still have Aristides Aquino, who set a Major League Baseball. What was that record? It was so many home runs within his first how many at bats? Do you remember off the
I
top of
don't
your
remember
head?
what it was, but I know
He was the
it was like
fastest.
13 or 14 home runs, like in like a month. Like it
It's
was it was
insane.
crazy.
It was almost like when he would step up to the plate, you just knew. Like you seriously just had a feeling.
Yeah.
I remember watching. I was at work and I was hovering over the MLB at bat app, and Aquino was up, and I saw that he had two home runs already in the day, and so I was just scrolling through and I was just like, what if I is he gonna hit another home run? Refresh 5 seconds later, home run. I'm like, what is this guy eating? Like, I need to know his workout regimen, everything. But you also have Josh Van Meter, and I love this signing that they brought back, especially for team chemistry. Derek Dietrich, and you also got Kyle Farmer on the bench. So, your thoughts about this lineup?
Yeah, so
Oh, and Nick Senzel. How do we forget him?
yeah. You know, I think it's just going to be the story of just like it's going to be platoons all over the place. The two big holes are probably going to be catcher and shortstop. I think if you platoon Barnhart and Casale, that's a playable position, because
Yeah,
Casale can hit lefties. Barnhart's dropping switch hitting, so he's only going to be hitting against righties. I think if you played it that way, then you could probably get somewhere around league average for catcher. Uh, Shortstop is what scares me the most about this team because Freddie Galvis, it just came out today actually that he's having some shoulder soreness, and there is no backup shortstop. You know, I think David Bell said that Kyle Farmer right now is our number two option at shortstop. Kyle Farmer's a catcher, so he's a guy that's can play some utility, but if he's the guy that's second on our depth chart for catcher, I think we're going to
yeah,
be in some trouble.
yeah. I agree there, but I mean, this team is just absolutely filthy, top to bottom. Hopefully, they don't have to deal with injuries. It's inevitable,
Yeah,
but
I think I think what we need to hope for is that if there are any injuries, they come in the outfield. You know, we talked about there are 6 guys that all really deserve some sort of playing time. I think Castellanos probably plays every day because we're paying him $16 million a year. So you're probably not going to bench the guy making that much money. But Winker and Irvin can platoon in left. Maybe you platoon Akiyama and Senzel because you don't know. Senzel's coming off the torn labrum, so you know he's going to be a close to opening day type of decision. Akiyama's coming from overseas, so you're not really sure if he's going to be like how he's going to adjust to major league pitching. And then you've got Aquino, who almost looks like the odd man out because he's the only guy with minor league options left. But, you know,
Yeah.
he's a guy that came up and absolutely tore the cover off the ball in August. And then September was just pretty much non existent.
And see, that's what I wanted to talk about too, real quick, because you talk about sophomore slumps and everything like that. Pitchers are going to start to figure out how to get these batters out, given time. Time will tell. But Aquino is still a very special player, in my opinion. It does suck that he is the odd man out, and he probably will start out in the minors just for this reason. Now, we do have 26 spots on this roster, but also look at Philip Irvin. The dude mashes lefties, right? The dude mashes lefties. If the Cubs are in town, John Lester's, Philip Irvin, put him clean up, because he is nasty against lefties. So you have these guys, like you said, that you can platoon, but for sure the only real player I could see in the outfield starting every single game would be Castellanos, for sure. So, I mean, it's a very nasty team. And then you look at their bullpen, too. Raisel Iglesias, Michael Lorenzen, who is wanting to throw 102 this year, which he probably will because the dude's an absolute animal. I'm ridiculous. Amir Garrett, Pedro Strop, and Robert Stevenson. And then potentially, too, Tyler Mahle. You never know. What if he pitches well in spring training? You could put him in the bullpen. I really like that idea. He's so young. He's 24. Give him a chance.
Yeah, I mean, you've got Tyler Mahle, you've got Lucas Sims, who came up and did some spot starting and just really pitched well. You got Cody Reed, who's going to be coming back from injury. Nate Jones, who we talked about earlier.
Nate Jones, yeah.
Tyler Thornburg, who's a couple years removed from being super good. Same thing with Jesse Biddle. You know, there's so much bullpen depth on the team this year that even if a guy struggles, suddenly you've got 3 guys in the minors that probably all can fill in. And then also Jose De Leon, who I failed to mention earlier, but that's a guy that we got for Brian O'Grady from the Rays. You know, this is a guy that was a former top prospect. I think he's only 25, but
yeah,
you know, that's another guy that's a former top prospect that you could just kind of throw in the mix and hope you get something for him. But I don't know. Overall, I like the depth for this team outside of shortstop. That's just the only place that's just a big hole.
No, I do too, and I think this is going to be the first team for sure that has a fighting chance for the division since 2013 when they went to the wild card and unfortunately lost to the Pittsburgh Pirates, who it's crazy to say now that the Pirates are in the wild card, but I mean, what are we to say either, right? So
yeah,
let's move on to the Milwaukee Brewers. They actually did have a lot of signings, a lot of additions to this team. Your thoughts, guys, right off the top that you want to talk about?
Yeah, so as far as additions go, I think that Omar Narvaez is huge. I wrote an article a while back over at Diamond Digest, and I talked about Omar Narvaez as a guy I wanted the Reds to go out and get this offseason. Obviously, the Brewers acquired him, 120 OPS last year,
That's pretty
22
good.
home runs. You know, he's a guy that's not going to do much for you defensively, which does kind of hurt, especially with them losing Yasmani Grandal. But, you know, what he brings to the plate offensively is huge, especially at the catcher position. That's really going to offset the loss that they're going to have with Grandal.
Yeah.
You know, we've talked about Rock Holt at length, so I'm not going to go too much into detail on him outside the fact that I just think he gives them some stability with the rest of their roster kind of being in question. The other guy that's kind of a good get that's sailed pretty far into the radar has been Avisail Garcia, 2 years, $20 million. You know, this guy's going to be a little bit above league average, play pretty good defense for you, hit for a decent average. But I mean, you just look at their losses this year.
That's what really gets them because they had these additions, but they lost so many. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, Grandal to the White Sox, Moustakas to the Reds, Drew Pomerantz, who they had acquired at the deadline, that was just absolutely lights out for them out of the bullpen. You know, there's not much here. Like they signed a bunch of guys that are just kind of like guys you'd expect to be on the bench, like Ryan Healy, Justin Smoke. Uh,
Yeah.
they signed Josh Lindblom out of the Korean Baseball League, 3 years, 9 million. He'll probably be like a league average pitcher, but they didn't really go out and get anybody that you're like, oh man, I'm super excited that they went and got this guy. And I'm not sure what the official number is, but something like 15 out of the 25 guys from their roster last year aren't even on the team anymore. So it's gonna be weird how their clubhouse
The
is.
chemistry.
Yeah, because it's gonna be all new guys.
Yeah, that's a big issue. But I mean, one thing I like about Justin Smoke, he had the best year of his career in 2017, where he hit 330, just an absolute crazy year for him. But ever since then, he's always been just above the Mendoza line, hitting about 210 ish. And as we see, last year he hit 208. But he is a guy that walks a lot. I know that's something you like in a player, and he does hit for power. Um, I like the deal. 1 year, 5 mil, maybe just give you some extra runs late in the ball game.
Right.
You float over a fastball and whatnot. So,
Yeah,
but
one other guy I wanted to ask you about because you'd probably have a better idea than I would. What are your thoughts on them getting Brett Anderson for 1 year, 5 million for the rotation?
2018, Brett Anderson, I like. 2019, Brett Anderson, okay, average. He's going to be a guy that gives you innings.
Mhm.
His durability is there. He's not going to get injured. He's definitely definitely a contact pitcher per se. And you have to think too, his numbers playing at Oakland Coliseum, one of the
Right.
most pitcher friendly ballparks, and his outfield, his FIP was so low. I mean, you look, his outfielders were just phenomenal for him. But I think this is good for the Brewers, especially they actually got him pretty cheap, I think, for a year, 5 mil. And I think it's just because of the year he had last year. Kind of a little
Mhm.
bit of an elevated ERA, still about average. But what's going to be worrisome for him being a lefty, facing the likes of Nick Castellanos, Chris Bryant, these righties, when he's a contact pitcher with
Mhm.
only 90 strikeouts and 176 innings. Like that's not a guy that is going to get the job done, but he might help you be like, okay, I can brush it off my shoulder just a little bit. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, that was the thing that concerned me the most. You kind of hit on it. That 90 strikeouts in 176 innings, that's like roughly a half a strikeout an inning in a stadium that's already pretty hitter friendly in
Yeah.
Miller Park or whatever insurance company they're calling it now. I'm not sure
Oh
when that
yeah,
name
I
change
forgot.
happens,
It's 2022 or 2023. Yeah,
but yeah, Miller Park.
Miller Park.
Uh,
It's always Miller Park.
but yeah, so and I mean he's probably going to slot in as like their three guy in the rotation. I mean they've got Brandon Woodruff, who he's probably going to be their ace this year. Who's not really a guy you think of as an ace. And then they've got Adrian Hauser, Brand Anderson, Josh Lindblom, who I mentioned, and then Eric Lauer, who they got in the trade, sending over Zach Davies and Trent Grisham when they brought back Luis Urias. But, he's a guy last year that was 4.5 ERA, 1.4 WHIP. It's like there's just not really anything about the rotation that stands out in a division that's pretty offensively heavy.
Yeah, I'll tell you one thing though that they do have that's strong, I would say, than other teams in this division. They do have a pretty good bullpen.
Mm-hmm.
Josh Hader, probably the best reliever in the game right now. Brent Suter comes back strong. That'd be great. I mentioned David Phelps, right? He did very well. He came off of Tommy John surgery. He missed the entire 2017, or excuse me, he missed the entire 2018 season and part of 2019. Came back with Toronto, pitched in a couple games, did very well, and then got traded to the Cubs. A solid 3 some ERA. And David Phelps is a guy who relies on his cutter. His cutter is really his main pitch. He only throws 2 or 3 pitches. So, but he's a pitch to contact pitcher as well. So, and then you got Alex Claudio, who's got that lefty, that arm slot. I like their bullpen, but the rotation is going to be kind of questionable for me. That's for sure.
Yes, you want to go ahead and let's get into their lineup.
Yeah, let's go ahead and see what the Milwaukee Brewers are sniffing, huh? So projecting lineup at catcher, we got Omar Narvaez, as Noah mentioned. His numbers last year hit 278, 353 on base percentage, and a 460 slugging percentage, which is 120 OPS plus. You got Ryan Braun at first base, And at second base, you got Keystone Hiura
Keston
and
Hero.
Keston Hiura. Yeah, see,
Yeah, it's difficult
these
name. That's
these
for
names
sure.
these names are tough. I'll tell you that. Eric Sogard at third, and I pinned in Brock Holt at shortstop because MLB Network mentioned that he will probably get more starts than Orlando Arcia. It will be platoon, but then you could say the same about the second baseman Keston Hiura, and
Mhm.
third base Eric Sogard. These are guys you can move all around the infield. The only one that'll probably stay stationary is Ryan Braun until they implement the universal DH. So, and then in the outfield, you got Lorenzo Cain, Christian Yelich, and Eviseo Garcia. This is a very solid outfield. I mean, you can't go wrong with this outfield right here. That's definitely their strong core. Um, they're going to cover a lot of ground, and they're also going to help you offensively. Your thoughts?
Yeah. So, like I said before, I like Omar Narvaez, but it's still a step down offensively from Yasmani Grandal. So you look at it that way, it's kind of like a negative in terms of what you're going to get out of that spot. Uh, Ryan Braun at first base. I mean, I'm not really that big on what Ryan Braun does anymore. He's a guy that was a MVP asterisk with the steroids thing, but
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Keston here's a guy that I really like at second base. He's a rookie last year, but he came up and he hit right away. He's a guy that I think is going to be a guy that they build around from here on out. He'll be a real staple in the lineup. The left side of the infield, though, is kind of where things are questionable. You've got Eric Sogard, Orlando Arcia, Luis Arias are all guys that just kind of like you don't know what you're going to get. Getting Brock Holt definitely helps them as far as that's concerned. Uh, can't go wrong with Yelich in the outfield. Dude's a stud, top 5 player in all of baseball. He's going to hit the cover off the ball year in and year out. Uh, I think that the X factor for this team is going to be Lorenzo Cain.
Yeah,
2018,
people
he was
sleep
a
on my boy
stud,
Lorenzo.
but 2019, he had a down year, and part of that is
Mm-hmm.
because his batting average on balls in play was way lower than his career average, and so he'll likely go back closer to where he used to be as far as being a guy that gets on base, gets a lot of hits. But I mean, you still never know. You got to hope that he does make that comeback.
Yeah, I think he will. He is one of my favorite players. Going through this decade, absolute stud with the Royals, and defensively still, A+ defense. And I want to know. I wish I knew what his outs above average was. It's got to be he's got to be a plus defender. That's for
Oh,
sure.
he's definitely a plus defender.
He's probably a +2, or I'd say probably a +2 defender. But Lorenzo Cain definitely. And then you got Christian Yelich, who balances you out offensively. Defensively, he's a little bit
He's
above
serviceable.
average. Yeah, he's serviceable defensively. And then Aviseo Garcia, just a sneaky production player. So I think the Brewers have a lot in their future potentially, but we'll get into that when we talk about the NL Central standings. Any final thoughts?
Nope, I think we've covered it all. You want to move on to the Pittsburgh Pirates?
Yes. The Pittsburgh Pirates. They added Jared Dyson. And congratulations. 230 batting average, 313 OBP, 320 slugging percentage, just so far below average for OPS, but 30 stolen bases. Pretty nice.
Oh.
Huge loss, though. Starling Marte. That is just an absolute dagger for someone that you want to build a team around. And then he's gone. So, what are your thoughts on the Pittsburgh Pirates?
They're not going to win in this division. Spoiler, I have them dead last in the division.
I do too. I do
Yeah.
too.
The thing with Jared Dyson is, and we saw this as Reds fans with Billy Hamilton, is you can't steal first base. And he hits like 230.
You know what's funny? Major League Baseball actually talked about doing that. Do you remember? They're like, "Oh, if the ball gets past the catcher, you can steal." That's so dumb. I would stop watching baseball if that happened.
Yeah, but Starling Marte, it hurts to lose him, but obviously you're not going to win, and I think that the Pirates know that, and so they got a couple of decent prospects back from the Diamondbacks, and so for that reason, I'm okay with them moving him. But yeah, I guess the biggest thing is that they got rid of Clint Hurdle finally. Maybe they'll finally step into this decade as far as like baseball goes. Like it's not going to be everybody should just throw at everybody and let's bunt 4 or 5 times a game.
Yeah, I'm
anymore.
not a big fan of Clint Hurdle, but I'm also not a big fan of their general manager. If you keep Austin Meadows and Tyler Glasnow on your team, think of this conversation we'd be having now, right?
Yeah. Well,
It'd
it
be a
is
lot.
worth noting that their GM did get fired too, so they have a new GM and manager.
Okay,
So
yeah, the GM. I'm glad the GM. Did the GM get fired before Clint Hurdle? Please tell me yes, because that was just the dumbest trade ever.
I think they both got let go at like the same time because they
Okay,
kind of cleaned house a little bit. So
okay, yeah, because that was just atrocious. Honestly, I mean, Austin Meadows is going to be an absolute stud in the next couple of years. I'm talking MVP caliber class now. The dude's nasty, and you put him there with Trevor Williams as well. The Pirates. I mean, they just and Joe Musgrove. Those are pretty solid 1, 2, 3s right there, if you ask me. But that's just not the case. And one thing I like to talk about too is Josh Bell, and the home run derby curse was definitely prominent to him. Had one of the most explosive first halves you could possibly imagine for a first baseman. Switch hitter, lots of pop, everything just fell off the table. Just completely fell off in the second half. And it also doesn't help too, because that's when guys start to check out. You have zero
yeah.
chance of making the playoffs. Guys are just kind of itching to just start next season and whatnot. What are your thoughts, man? I mean, just overall of the Pittsburgh Pirates. I mean, we can go into their lineup if you want to right now, but I mean, what are you thinking of? And they're missing Jamison Tyone too, which is a tough loss.
Yeah, I mean, we can go ahead and get into the lineup if you want to, because I mean, there's just not really. I mean, we can just kind of glance over it,
Yeah,
but
I'll pull it
you
up.
know, Josh Bell at first base. At this point, he's kind of turning into how I feel about Trey Mancini with the Orioles, and that's that I just feel bad that he's stuck on that team. Um, Colin Moran's a guy that I've always kind of liked, but at times he's struggled. You know, Adam Frazier is a guy that I think we brought up. Was that last episode? He was on start one, cut one, bench one. So we talked about him a
Yeah, I
little
mean,
bit.
he had a pretty good year for being an outfielder, an everyday outfielder, having to move into the infield, and he's still slated to be the starting second baseman this year. So I think he's actually a pretty good player, if you ask me.
Yeah, I think that the guy to watch this year, outside of Josh Bell, because Josh Bell's already kind of established himself as a player, would be Brian Reynolds. This is a guy that came up last year. He's going to be a high batting average type of guy, play solid defense for you in the outfield. I would say that him and then maybe in the rotation, Mitch Keller are probably the two guys that might be mainstays in the future that are just kind of trying to establish themselves now. So those would be the two
Yeah.
guys that I would watch for. But Kevin Newman's not going to blow you away. Jacob Stallings at catcher isn't going to do much for you. We've already talked about Jared Dyson. There's not really a whole lot here, and so I don't expect them to win a whole lot.
Yeah, we'll just go through their lineup for people listening, just audio only through the podcast. So catching, we got Jacob Stallings, first base, Josh Bell, the second base, Adam Frazier, third base, Colin Moran, shortstop, Kevin Newman. Could also maybe throw in Cole Tucker. He was a high prospect. He kind of went on a tear in the first couple games that he was a part of and then just fell off, but still a bench player. Brian Reynolds, as Noah mentioned, in the outfield, Gregory Polanco, and Jared Dyson. That's
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you real quickly. There's one other addition that we didn't talk about, and I was just curious if you ever played against him in high school because I know you're a few years older than I am. Did you ever play against Luke Maley?
no, I didn't. He graduated when I was in seventh grade because Covcath, they won the region his senior year in 2000. Or no, they lost region to Beechwood in 2009 at Florence Freedom. I didn't play against him. I played against his brother, Ben.
Mm-hmm.
I think his brother's name
Yeah,
is
I was
Ben.
gonna say I played against one of his brothers too.
Yeah.
When I was coming through high school, but yeah, I didn't realize he was that much older than
Yeah. Luke Maley
you.
actually went 2 for 2 for the Pirates today.
Oh, there you go. Maybe he's the new star in the making.
Oh, goodness. Watch out. He actually might get the starting job if you think about it. He has a good chance.
Yeah, I mean he's a plus defender, but I mean he's like a career like 200 hitter.
Did I
So
hold on? I gotta bring the viewers in here. This is gonna be you might think it's funny, you might think it's not funny. I have a story about Luke Maley. So in 2017, the league that we were talking about you joining, right? So every year we go visit a ballpark. In 2017, we went to Kansas City. Beautiful stadium, atmosphere was electric, even though the Royals were about 15 games out of the race. Very devoted fans, I should say. They were playing the Blue Jays. As we know, Luke Maley played on the Blue Jays. He was the backup to Russell Martin at that time. So the first day we were there, our buddy Jordan, he went up to him like, "Oh, hey, Maley, what's up? I went to Scott, whatever." Because I think he actually did play against him or something like that.
Mhm.
And Maley's like, "Oh, hey, man. Oh, hey, how you doing? Whatever." Next day, Jordan goes back down there again to the bullpen, and he goes, "Hey, Maley, what's up?" Maley looks up, gives him it's like a mean looking face. Looks over
Uh-huh.
to like a pitcher in the bullpen. The pitcher goes like this, like, "No, don't talk to him." And Maley just put his head down. And then Jordan was just like, "Hey, F you, man, like, what?" And so I don't know. A lot of guys just kind of don't like him now for that reason. Uh, but it's still, it's really cool though to see someone out of this region, especially Cubcath, just come
Mhm.
out and I mean they're playing every day, or not every day,
Right.
but they're on an MLB roster
Yeah.
and they haven't been sent down, which is surprising, but it's pretty cool because I think I'm trying to think of a last professional baseball player that even like made it to something around here. I guess Nate Jones, if you really want to.
Yeah.
I mean, Steve Delabar, who played for the Freedom, he was a 2013 All Star. He played for the Freedom beforehand in the Frontier League. Jose Martinez, he played for the Southern Illinois Miners, I think, in the Frontier League. Same with Tanner Roark.
Yeah. Former Florence Freedom. See, Tim Adelman, I believe, didn't
Yep,
him or someone else got cut from an independent league team and made the MLB?
that name sounds really familiar. I think so.
I think it's Tim Adelman.
I think so too. I'll have to look it up. I'll look it up after the podcast. But yeah, just a little fun story about Luke Maley, who you guys probably don't even know. So look at his stats, and they're kind of laughable. Anyway, moving on. Let's talk about the St. Louis Cardinals. St. Louis Cardinals won the NL Central last year, and I'm going to say this right off the bat. I know it's really early. The season hasn't started yet, but my NL Cy Young winner for the 2020 season, Jack Flaherty. What
I
do
can
you
respect that. I mean, he was absolutely dominant.
.93 ERA in the second half. Get off me.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely a stud, and it just feels like the Cardinals are just some sort of like pitching factory. Like I feel like they always just
Dude, they
bring like
always
every guy
have
they
been. It's
bring up immediately
insane.
comes up and he's just a stud right away.
You're absolutely right. And now they have Matthew Liberatore that they absolutely stole from the Rays. Are you kidding me?
Yeah,
That's
I mean, biasly as a Reds fan, I'm glad that he's only in low A. It's probably not going to be on the roster for the season. Unbiasedly though, I think it's a huge get for them. The dude's going to develop into a stud, especially in their in their organization. So he's definitely going to be a name to watch for if you're a Cardinals fan here in the near future.
yeah, absolutely. And he was part of the additions that we're going to talk about. Kwang Hyun Kim, 2 years, $8 million, and evidently wants to be called KK as we have it in our rundown. Do you know any story about that or whatever?
I don't know. That's just I guess maybe it's one of those things where like they just think their name's gonna be too hard to pronounce. Like Yoshitomo Satsugo for the Rays is just wanted to be go by Yoshi. I think it's just one of those
He
things
got
where
his
it's just
first
kind
hit,
of
by the
like,
way, too, today.
yeah, he did. I saw that. Yeah, I think it's just one of those things where like, hey, this is probably gonna be easier than trying to pronounce my actual name.
I like it. I like it. So KK, okay. And then we got Brad Miller, veteran guy, 1 year, $2 million. I think it's actually a pretty expensive contract for a year and Brad Miller, but that's a guy who could still somewhat get the job done. Well over 800 OPS, almost 900 really, if you think about it. How many games did he play in last year? Is it a small
I don't.
sample size? It's got to
Yeah,
be a small
I
sample
mean,
size because he's
it's a
not that good.
smallish sample size,
Yeah.
but I mean, when he played for the Phillies, he's kind of a utility guy last year for the Phillies, and I mean, when he played, he hit, and I mean, he's a guy that can play pretty much everywhere in the infield, corner, outfield spots. As a bench bat, it's not a bad guy to have because he can hit with some pop.
Yeah. Well, then let's go ahead and talk about their losses. They lost Jose Martinez, as we mentioned. Jose Martinez, man, he's always just kind of been like a weird player for me. The way he plays is he's just a wonky type of player
Yeah.
because he can hit for power. Like the dude has tons of power, but he also strikes out a lot.
Mhm.
And it's going to be interesting to see because we talked about how weak the Rays right field is going to be, like that right side, second base, first base, right field. Where they're going to put him? Are they just going to slate him as a DH, which is what it's looking like right now? Or what? And then obviously the biggest one, Marcell Ozuna, that they lost. That was huge.
Yeah.
Thoughts?
I mean, it's just kind of another one of those things where it's like they really didn't do much to add, and then they lose a couple of contributors on the major league roster. I mean, Jose Martinez, I think we're 2 years now for removed from when he hit like 320. Like when he's healthy, he's a stud at the plate.
Yeah.
Marcell Ozuna, you know, pretty serviceable defense, but he's a guy that can hit for some pop. He's kind of like a mistake pitch hitter, where like he's not gonna hit some pitch where you're gonna be like, wow, how did he even get to that? But like if you hang a curveball, then you might as well just not even You might as well just not even turn around because it's definitely gonna be 10 rows deep in the bleachers. So
Yeah, absolutely. And with Marcell Ozuna being gone too to the Braves, they're gonna miss that bat, right? They're gonna miss
oh yeah,
the defender too in him, and but I mean they're still such a good ball club. Like you said, they're pitching. It's just kind of like in football. You say you got DB, like defensive back university. You can kind of say like pitching university is
yeah.
the St. Louis Cardinals. They've always found guys to just get the job done. Um, and that was how I remember when Alex Reyes came up. Big name, big guy, just shutting everyone down. And now they have Andrew. I mean, they've had Andrew Miller, and now they have this Kwang Young Kim, KK. It's a team to look up for. Should we pull up their lineup?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. For the St. Louis Cardinals, the projecting lineup, we got Yadier Molina, the veteran. Wonder how many years does he left out on his contract? Do you know? It can't be
I
that
think
many.
this is the last year of his contract, and I think it came out publicly that he wants a 2-year extension.
Wow. That'd be kind of cool. So we got Yadi catching, Paul Goldschmidt, first base. Colton Wong had a tremendous 2019 campaign at second. Matt Carpenter at third. He's fallen off the train quite a bit, but still, veteran guy. You never know. He might be able to give you a serviceable 245, 250, if maybe that's feasible. Paul DeYoung, I really like this guy too. I think he's an undervalued shortstop in the league. And then you got Tommy Edman in the outfield, Dexter Fowler, and Harrison Bader. And I really, really like Harrison Bader, and he went off today in spring training too. Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, catcher with Yadier Molina is probably a black hole offensively. You don't really know what you're going to get out of Matt Carpenter. Looking at the outfield, who knows what Dexter Fowler is going to show up this year. Harrison Bader's not really a guy that's known for his offense either. It's just kind of like, like they have like half their lineup is guys that don't really hit much at all, and then the other half is guys that are absolute studs at the plate. Because then you look at Paul Goldschmidt and Colton Wong, who had a terrific year last year. Paul DeYoung, who's a shortstop who can hit for not only average but also hits for power. Tommy Edman's a guy that they brought up last year that just gets on base all of the time. Uh, you know, Depth wise, I'm not really sure how I feel about it. They've got Tyler O'Neill off the bench as another option for the outfield. Yara Munoz is a utility infielder, and then Brad Miller, who we've already talked about. But I'm not really sure how confident I am in their lineup. But I mean, and then they've got the pitching to kind of back that up, though.
Exactly, and I understand where you're coming from with the confidence in their lineup, but their pitching is stout and they're very stoic, and they're going to shut guys down. And the Cardinals always find a way to win. And if you can just get like even 3 to 4 guys just to put up godly offensive numbers, you're gonna be fine. That's just the way I see it. But any other final thoughts on the St. Louis Cardinals?
Yeah, just I briefly want to talk about the rotation, just because I'm kind of curious how you think it's going to play out.
Okay.
Because Miles Michaelis is supposed to miss about a month at the beginning of the season. Adam Wainwright's kind of getting up there in age. Carlos Martinez is also a guy that, he's struggled at times in the past, like outside of Jack Flaherty, who you've already said that you think he's going to be the Cy Young, and I mean, I kind of agree. I'd have to think about it a little more, but he's definitely going to be in the conversation.
Yeah.
How do you feel about the rest of the rotation?
It just seems like the pitching staff just leans on each other. Like these are guys that you don't expect to put up decent numbers or good numbers, but they're going to. I think the big question mark is Carlos Martinez, because we know he was transitioned to the bullpen these past couple of years. Right. So for him to come in, definitely going to be a number 5, first of all. Adam Wainwright, he kind of that same position where Carlos Martinez was, right? He was a starter in the beginning stages of his career, went back to the pen, and now here he is again. So your 4 or 5 is already kind of is questionable. But there's no doubt they have the stamina and they have the durability. They understand the process. If they can find a groove, all it takes maybe two good starts back to back, and you're there.
Yep.
And I think these guys definitely have that ability to do that. Now, Dakota Hudson, I think he's going to move into that 2 role. I just think you can't put Miles Michaelis. You have to move him back to the 3, especially being that lefty. And I think it'll be a nice transition going from Flaherty to Hudson to Michaelis. You're just working your way down the speed path with all these pitchers. And that's one thing I think that the Cardinals have that other teams don't. They have a variation of speed. Each pitcher has a unique quality that the other doesn't have. And I think that's what's going to help them come over the hump. So that's just my opinion. What about you?
Yeah, I'm not necessarily sold, but they've got guys that are just like quietly really good. Like a name you mentioned, Dakota Hudson. He's not a guy that gets talked about around the league a whole lot.
Yep.
But he's a guy that comes in, gives you better than league average ERA, 5 to 6 innings every time out. He's never a guy that like pitches you out of ball games. It'll be interesting to see how KK does out of the bullpen. Is Andrew Miller going to come back and be Andrew Miller of old, or is he going to be like he was last year for the Cardinals?
Exactly. Yeah.
How's Alex Reyes going to do out of the pen? He struggled with arm injuries in the past. Is he going to be healthy? And then it's also important to note Jordan Hicks is going to miss part of the season because he's still recovering from Tommy John. But, who knows how it's going to play out? With that kind of thing in mind, do you want to move on to the standings?
Absolutely. And you are first, my friend, as usual, when we talk about the standings. So I'm going to pull it up. Oh, wait, actually, no, real quick. We have the fan vote, I should say. I put the fan vote out there. You all voted.
All right, let's hear what they've got.
And appreciate it. So we put blank will win the NL Central. Let us know. And you all responded. So you all, 47%, have the Cincinnati Reds winning the division. 23% other, because you can only put 4 options on Twitter. So we put other and then reply. The other was the Chicago Cubs. So Reds, Cubs, and then you have the St. Louis Cardinals at 22% coming in third. And then you have the Milwaukee Brewers fourth and the Pittsburgh Pirates fifth. So those are the fan stand. What do you think about the fan standings? That are the projections.
Unless I misheard you, I think they're the same as mine.
They are.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
I think they did a good job.
All right, everyone. You got Noah's approval. So talk a little bit about your reasonings why and who you have making the playoffs and whatnot.
Yeah. So, I picked the Reds as first. Now, obviously, that's a big jump for them. They came in fourth last year. But I think what it really came down to for me is that they were the only team that went out and really made big additions this year, and they didn't lose anybody. You look at the Cardinals, they lost Marcell Ozuna, and they didn't really add anybody. You look at the Cubs, they lost Castellanos, and they added Jason Kipnis. Same thing with the Brewers as far as losing, Mike Moustakas and Yasmani Grandal. And the Pirates are just the Pirates. So, I have the most faith in them. And this is unbiased as well. I mean, I just genuinely, just looking at the rosters, I feel like they've got the best one going into the season. What's worth noting is I have the Cubs over the Cardinals. I picked them mostly because I believe in the Cubs' offensive upside a bit more. Anthony Rizzo is a guy that year in and year out is consistently a great player. Same thing with Chris Bryant. Wilson Contreras is coming into his own as a player. And I think that in this division, the way it is this year, you're better suited with a better offense than a better pitching staff. Because, you look at the Cardinals, their pitching staff is pretty good, but there are some question marks in their lineup. And if you're having to go up against good pitching staffs consistently, then it's going to be a little bit harder for you if you can't produce runs offensively. The Brewers have its fourth place and the Pirates at fifth place. It's kind of, I think that their rosters are just a step behind the top three. But realistically, you can take any of these top 4 teams and they could easily win the division if things break their way.
Exactly. It's all about momentum.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we talked about it off air. Like, it's just that everybody's kind of neck and neck. And it just like, if things break one way for one team, then suddenly they're just going to leap to the top of the standings. Like, I think this division, I think, comes down to like the last 2 or 3 games.
Yeah, that's a very good take. And I think it's important to mention too that we both have the Pittsburgh Pirates at the bottom. Now, how many teams do you have coming out of the NL Central to make the postseason? Because we have the
Oh yeah,
division
my
winner.
mistake. I
Yeah, you're
didn't.
good.
Yeah, so I have the Reds obviously as the division winner, and then I have the Cubs penciled in as my second wild card team. So they would be playing the Phillies in the first round of the or in the wild card, I guess I should say.
Okay, cool. Well, then let's go ahead and move over to my predictions. I actually have the St. Louis Cardinals winning the division. I think their pitching is just very stoic. I mean, they're like we said, pitching university. These are well, offense wins games, defense wins championships. Say that for football, but I think it still applies for baseball. You have to have pitching, and offensively, they have Paul Goldschmidt, they have Colton Wong, and if Matt Carpenter to come back to be serviceable, 245, 250-ish, they're going to be good. Paul DeYoung, just above average defensively, contact hitter, gets on base at shortstop. Yadi Molina, good guy to have behind the dish. We both are in agreement. Does not perform that well offensively like he used to in his prime. I have the Reds at 88 and 74, the same record that you have. I just have them as my wild card team. So they are my wild card team joining the Atlanta Braves for the wild card. So you have the Cubs and the Phillies.
Mm-hmm.
I have the Reds and the Braves. So I think we're both set in stone right there. I have the Milwaukee Brewers in third at 86 and 76. I think their bullpen is just better than the Cubs and the Pirates. And offensively, with that outfield and Aviseo Garcia, Christian Yelich, and Lorenzo Cain, I think they're still going to be able to win some ball games, still be in the conversation. Just like you said, these are teams that have a fighting chance to go on a stretch. I remember, I think it was 2012 or 2013. Don't quote me on that. But in the last month of the season, the Braves were leading the wild card at 9 games, and they blew it. They blew it, and same with the Red Sox, I believe. There were 2 teams, one from each division. I believe it was the Red Sox because the Rays went to the playoffs that year to get the wild card. So those are just my predictions, and then I got the Cubs at 79 and 83. I just think they're going to be off. I don't know how David Ross is going to fare out. I know he's got chemistry with the players. He played with some of those guys in the 2016 World Series. But I'm not sold. I'm just not sold on them. It's going to take a lot for me personally to think that I will be sold. Because second base is a hole for me. Kyle Schwarber, not a good defensive outfielder. And his offensive statistics come into play just a little bit. So, and Ian Happ too. He played at the University of Cincinnati, which is cool. But just kind of a mediocre hitter.
Yeah.
So, and then I have the Pirates at 65 and 97. Actually, I have them as one of the worst teams in Major League Baseball. I just don't think they're going to be able to compete because the rest of these 4 teams are going to be just clashing each other nonstop, going for that top spot. And unfortunately, the Pittsburgh Pirates are going to be the redheaded stepchild. So it's not going to be fun for them. But those are my thoughts. What do you think about my my standing projections?
As we're talking about this, I really like I think that this is going to be the division to watch this year in baseball. And we talk about how different our divisions are, where I've got the Cardinals at 85 games in third place and you've got them winning. Or I've got the Cubs making a wild card and you have them below 500. It's so cool how much parity there is in this division where anything could really happen outside the Pirates winning. They're not going to win. But outside of that, it's so open. I think it's refreshing compared to, how it seemed to have been here recently in baseball, where you've just got these 2 or 3 super teams that are just absolutely incredible, and then everyone else is just kind of playing for second place. So I don't know. I'm really excited for this year, and I think this division's a big reason why.
Yeah, and it's funny too. We got a comment on our YouTube live stream. I remember when someone said, "I remember when everyone thought that the Cubs would be winning the NL Central for the next 5 years," and I do too. And it's crazy how things change because technically they still could win the division this year. Do I think so? Absolutely not. But in retrospect, They do have technical talent,
Hmm.
but I just don't see anyone jump in the Cardinals. I think they're just a strong favorite. And my biggest, I forgot to mention this with the Reds, my only concern are team chemistry issues. Like, how are these players going to mesh? Because now you pretty much have a different infield, in the middle part of the infield, I should say. Freddie Galvis, a little bit of time with the Reds last year, and now you have Moustakas penciled in, and then Shogo Akiyama and Nick Castellanos. I mean, those are, four guys just right there out of the
Hmm.
nine that are going to be different, and it all comes into play. It's going to be a factor, especially with David Bell being the manager and how he attacks this. Because I know Shogo Akiyama, he prefers to bat one or two. He doesn't want to bat anywhere below there. Um, but yeah, so I think that's it. Should we move on to our final segment?
Let's get into it.
All right, as everyone knows, our final segment: start one, cut one, bench one. So how this works: we give each other three players in their respective positions, and you have to choose one to start, choose one to cut, and choose one to bench, and then the other person will go vice versa. So this week we have first baseman and left field. We work our way around the diamond. Noah, this time you give me mine first.
All right, so I've got some first basemen for you today. A couple NL Central guys, and then one from out west. So
Out west, huh? Oh. Okay, go.
that's not who you think it is.
That's unfortunate. Okay.
Well, I had a feeling he'd get picked, so I went with your three guys are Josh Bell, Anthony Rizzo, and Max Muncy.
Ooh, Muncy, a former Athletic. Dude absolutely went Yahtzee, by the way, yesterday for the Dodgers in their spring training game. Oh my gosh. It was like at least 430 feet. It was an absolute bomb ski. Anyway, are we talking first half Josh Bell or second half Josh Bell?
It's just Josh Bell. You just got to.
Ooh. Oh man, why do you do this to me? I'm cutting Josh Bell.
Okay.
I'm cutting Josh Bell. He didn't have that great of a career, and then he just came out of nowhere this year, and then he fell off again after the All-Star break. He's not a very good defender. He can't move. The only upside he has to himself is his OBP and being a switch hitter. I'll give him that. And when he does connect, it does go a long way, but it's not very often. Oh man, this is tough. I'm gonna start Rizzo. Old, reliable. Has a good team chemistry when he's out there. Meshes well with the guys. Very good defensively, and very good hitter as well. Kind of had a couple down years, but still, I'd say one of the top first basemen, maybe top 10. Top 10 for sure. And he could get the job done. He's a gap-to-gap hitter. He sprays the ball to all parts of the field. And then I'll bench Max Muncy only for the purpose that he can play other positions, because he's played second base and third base for the Dodgers. And just after last year's, where he was really solidified as a first baseman. And I think after this year, seeing how his season will go, he'll be top 5 first baseman in all of Major League Baseball. I truly believe that. He's a very good baseball player. He was undervalued in Oakland. Oakland has a very good farm system. Optioned him too many times to the Dodgers, and the dude is absolutely shoved, and he's got tons of pop. I mean, he's a small dude with tons of pop. He can spray the ball to all parts of the field as well, and hit home runs about 430 feet. So, and his defense is So I'll bench Muncy. So I cut Josh Bell, start Anthony Rizzo, and I bench Max Muncy. What about you?
I actually had Max Muncy as my guy, as my starter, and then I get Rizzo as my bench, and then Josh Bell's the cut. For the same reason you said you would have benched him as the guy is the reason I picked him. I think that both Muncy and Rizzo are pretty close.
Goes hand in hand.
But I think that the position flexibility just adds a little bit extra value for me. They were both like right next to each other in production last year. Max Muncy had a 133 OPS plus, Anthony Rizzo 137. It's interesting though, if you look at the numbers for last season, that Josh Bell had a higher OPS plus than both of them, and he was awful for half the season.
That just shows you how.
even with how bad he was in the second half, he still had a 143 OPS plus.
That's insane.
Yeah. The other thing, and I'll just mention it quickly and then we can move on, but I just thought it was interesting how big of a jump Josh Bell had from last year to this year, or from 2 years ago to last year. His slugging percentage jumped 150 points, and his home runs tripled.
See, that's what worries me though. It's like it just comes out of nowhere. Is he
Yeah.
gonna? He's gonna fall back to earth. I feel like that's why I cut him.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I just thought that it's pretty crazy that you could say that a guy just tripled his home runs and added 150 points in slugging percentage and still was better than two guys that we both believe are better players in terms of OPS plus for a season. So
Yeah, it's
all right,
insane.
what do you got for me?
All right. So for Noah, we have left fielders. So that means next week we'll have center fielders and right fielders, and then after that, we can just kind of maybe do a historical. Maybe we could do a historical round where we choose players. But for you have left fielders. So Madeira High School, their finest, Midland Redskin 2012 that I played against. We got absolutely shelled. Andrew Benintendi.
All right.
And then you have probably one of the perennial favorites to be NL MVP, Juan Soto. And then another guy who could be a future AL MVP. It's going to be hard, though, because of Trout. But let's just say, how about AL MVP finalist, Austin Meadows in the future? So you got Andrew Benintendi, Juan Soto, and Austin Meadows.
Okay. Well, I think for me, Juan Soto is definitely my start guy.
That was just
I think he's a guy with a that's probably going to slash 300, 400, 500 probably every year from here on out. He's 21 and he's
21. That's insane.
Yeah, and he's like a top 5 candidate in the MVP already. And he's pretty much everything you want in a player, except the defense could be a little bit better, but he plays left field, so it's not really that big of a deal. But he's already a star. He's 21, and I can't wait to see how his career continues to progress. As far as I think I'm going to cut Andrew Benintendi. The consistency, I don't think it's there enough for me to pick him over Meadows. I think that the upside for Meadows is also higher. Ask me a year from now, and it could be completely different because Meadows might come back to earth a little bit from what he did last season for the Rays. But I just think that the offensive upside is too high on Austin Meadows to pass up on him for Benintendi. How did you rate these guys?
I actually had the exact same. I completely agree with you. You got to start Juan Soto. This is a guy who has come into Major League Baseball and has absolutely shoved, has not looked back. And a lot of people don't talk about him because they talk about Ronald Acuna Jr. Last year, at least, or in 2018. And it's understandable, right? He debuts at 19 years old, but then, hey, this guy from the Atlanta Braves, just even better, which is insane. But if you really look over his first 2 or 3 years in the major leagues, well, 2 years. 2 years. I think his numbers are almost better than Ronald Acuna, in a way. If you look at his OPS plus and everything like that, Juan Soto is a special player. And I don't think we've had this type of player since 2011 when Mike Trout came into the league. And I know that's a bold statement. Mike Trout is Mike Trout, don't get me wrong, but I'm saying where someone really just takes over. And being on the East Coast too, this is what Major League Baseball needs. They need a baseball player like Juan Soto. Shows a lot of personality, and I think it's really cool too. They added his take for a ball in this year's game of MLB The Show. I'm definitely putting that in my customized player. Maybe a Rob Soto, maybe. I'm just kidding. Too cringy. Anyway, but then with Austin Meadows, absolutely love this guy. Absolutely love this guy. I talk about this guy all the time. He is a plus defender, and he is tremendous offensively. I've been waiting for him to come back down to earth. And I think that's what the Pirates were hoping for when they traded him away for Chris Archer. Hasn't happened yet. And he's just going off even more. And unfortunately, I would cut Benintendi as well. because he just beat me, you know, back in
Yep.
2012. That's nah.
Yeah.
No, he's undersized. He's undersized. He plays left field. People say he plays a good left field. Well, he plays 81 games at Fenway Park. You know, it's not. You can't
Yeah.
really get his outs above average. You can't really compare that to Juan Soto. You know, they're just different ballparks. So I think that's the interesting part. His arm isn't as good as Juan Soto or as Austin Meadows. But one thing he is better at than all these other players, I will say, is hitting left-handed pitching. Andrew Benintendi, it seems like it doesn't matter for him if it's a righty or lefty. He has the same approach. If it's outside, he'll go with it. Inside, he'll pull it. That's the one upside that he has above these other players. But yeah, those are my reasons too. So, any final thoughts before we end tonight's podcast?
Yeah, I'm going to do some shameless self-plugging. So for those of you that don't know, I write over at Diamond Digest as well as doing the podcast here. And sometime within the next week or two, I will have my detailed, in-depth season preview over the Cincinnati Reds. So if you're a Reds fan and that's something that interests you, it'll be over on my Twitter account as well as on Diamond Digest website. I'll do a better job of promoting that once that actually comes out, but just something on the horizon.
And us at Chalk Talk Nation, we're always going to promote. So be on the lookout for my boy's article. He's a great writer, and he's very passionate about the Reds, as you can tell. If you've watched the other podcasts in his dorm room, you've seen the classic Cincinnati Reds flag. Mm-hmm. You can follow Diamond Digest too on Twitter. I believe it's at Diamond_Digest, I believe. Something like that.
It's either, if you go to my Twitter, it's in my Twitter bio, so you can just get there that way.
And you have it and his Twitter is on the screen right now. Be sure to give us a follow. Follow us at Chalk Talk Nation. Visit our website, www.chalktalknation.com. You can visit our podcast there if you want to listen to an archive. If you're, have a long day at work, or if you're driving, you're stuck in traffic, why not tune in? Can't even talk anymore. And listen to some millennials talk about baseball, right? It's a great time. Next week, we're going to be doing the AL Central preview, and I think this is going to be a very interesting division as well, at least for 3 teams that we can say for right now.
Yep.
We hope to see you all there next Sunday night. We do podcasts every Sunday night at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. We love your guys' feedback, and we always want you guys to comment live. And one thing we're going to be trying to do, as you've seen on the channel, I personally have been uploading videos reacting to certain situations, big MLB news. Well, we're going to try and change that, and Noah and I will try and react in real time, and we'll upload videos. So be sure to leave us a like. It really helps us out. If you like our videos, comment below and subscribe to our channel. But until then, we will see you all next week. Peace.